What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And the New York Giants are not tanking, but they could be undergoing some serious coaching staff changes by the end of the season. Now, Wink Martindale, Mike Kafka, they've been pretty inconsistent this season. I think Wink Martindale's done a decent job. Mike Kafka, on the other hand, this is the worst offense that I've ever been subject to watching in the history of football, in the history of my lifetime. This has been bad. He might get fired. It sounds like the expectation is that Brian Daboll stays this offseason, continues as the head coach next year, but with some new coordinators in place. There's a new report indicating that both Kafka and Martindale could be fired this offseason. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that. We also want to talk about kind of some of these quotes circling around from Giants players, from coaches, about how this team is definitively not tanking. But does it really matter? Because this team is so goddamn bad, they're going to lose all these games anyway, right? That's how I feel about it. But we'll see. It's a long season. There's plenty of weeks remaining. We know that Tyrod Taylor is ramping up. He's getting ready to return to the football field soon. Could be back by around week 14 for Monday night versus the Green Bay Packers. And then maybe that tank talk where, the Giants aren't tanking, but they're going to lose anyway. Tyrod Taylor kind of gives them a chance to win, at least more of a chance than Tommy DeVito does. So the conversation starts to become a little bit more interesting when you dive into that. And of course, that's what we're going to do in today's episode. Dive into this report about these coordinators and dive into kind of some of these reactions from the players about the notion of even thinking about tanking. So before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topics down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what is your initial reaction to the report that the Giants could end up firing both Mike Kafka and Wink Martindale at the end of the season?
I'm doing pretty good. Responding to the report of firing Kafka and Wink. Look, if anyone's going to get fired, it's going to be Kafka. I don't know why you would fire Wink Martindale. Like, he is a head coaching candidate. He's experienced. His defense is very good. We've just unfortunately been in a position where, like past seasons, the defense is on the field a lot. And when the defense is on the field a lot, they're going to get gassed early, and they're eventually going to end up giving up points. Now, they've gotten beaten up a couple of times. And look, I think that the Giants defense, we saw what they did against the Buffalo Bills. We saw what they did against a couple teams, really great performances. And unfortunately, I think they're just low on morale. Like, you trade away Leonard Williams, your offense is just injured. You're losing games by a significant margin. Your offense is averaging 11.8 points per game, my friends. If you're a defensive player on the Giants, you're like, we can't even play well enough to give us a chance to win. You know what I mean? The Giants, they gave up 14 points to the Bills, and we had a chance at the 1 yard line twice and still couldn't score. Like, if you're a defender, you're like, I don't trust our offense. I don't even know how I can maintain my own confidence at this rate. Just losing at this level. And, Saquon Barkley's like, we don't feel like we're a 2-8 team, but you are 2-8, and you guys are freaking bad. And, like, that's really the reality of the situation, unfortunately, is that this team is awful. They've been injured a lot, and the defense has shown us that they can be elite at times. And that's with a rookie cornerback in Deonte Banks being CB1 right now. That's with a couple of youngsters and not having Azeez Ojulari. It's really a situation where the Giants defense has some really good, cornerstone pieces, but end of the day, it's just so much moving around them. There's so many variables that are negatively impacting this team, like the offense, that has hurt them and really killed the morale. So at this point in time, I don't blame Wink Martindale at all. In fact, I think that he's one of the few guys that I think they should keep and shouldn't even be a consideration. Like, he should be here next year, because at the same breath, I do think that Brian Daboll could use that support, that veteran kind of leadership, that opinion, that guy that kind of holds things together. Like, Wink is very straightforward. I think he's a good factor in the locker room. I think getting rid of him would be a really bad move for this team long term. But then you look at Mike Kafka, and like, Mike Kafka is obviously in the middle of a really bad season that's been impacted significantly by the offensive line. Obviously, injuries to Daniel Jones, injuries to Tyrod Taylor. What can you do? He can't control those kind of variables there. Now the offense has been really, really embarrassing, has been really, really poor and underperforming. But how much of that can be attributed to play calling? I think there's certainly a variable, like there's certainly a little bit of blame that gets placed on that, but not a whole lot. Like, maybe like 15% is play calling. The rest of it is injuries and underperforming talent. Like, that's kind of how I look at it at this point in time. Maybe you have a different opinion there. But I think that because of how well the Giants offense performed last year, I think that they should give him another year to figure it out. And I think that maintaining that consistency is a good thing. I think consistency is key. If you're not going to fire your head coach, you're not going to fire your GM. Why do they get escape route? Like, why are they saved but not the coordinators? You know what I mean? The head coach and the GM are more responsible for the roster construction than anybody else, and more responsible for the decisions, in the pregame, strategies and whatnot than anybody else. Like, if they're going to be saved, like, are we really going to place all the blame on a coordinator? I get that, like, sometimes you can do that and it works out. But Brian Daboll is an offensive guru. You know what I mean? Like, if he saw a way to fix this offense, I feel like he would have done it. He has that power. Mike Kafka, he is not giving all the power to Mike Kafka, I don't personally believe. If Daboll felt like they could fix things, I think it would be fixed. But I just don't think there is a way back when you have Tommy DeVito starting at quarterback and your offensive line has been picked up off the street, and you're using like guys that should not be on NFL rosters, some of them, as prominent starters who have barely played at some of these positions. Like, for example, Justin Pugh, barely any experience at left tackle, has been a regular left tackle for us this season when Andrew Thomas was down. So, what are your thoughts on that? Not on board with Wink Martindale being fired at all. Mike Kafka, I'm okay with giving him another year. If they were to fire him and bring somebody in, I just hope it aligns with whatever their draft strategy is. If it does mean drafting a quarterback, someone that can really maximize that talent of a quarterback and build an offense that suits that caliber.
I'm okay with letting Mike Kafka go. I mean, someone has to take the blame. Someone has to take the fall for how bad this offense has been. Like, this isn't just a bad NFL offense. We're not talking about, oh, the quarterback doesn't seem comfortable in the system. We're not talking about, oh, you know what, the Giants just have a lack of talent. So, this is a historically bad offense. Like, this is disgusting to watch. This is something that I never dreamed was possible. I mean, this is the stuff of nightmares. Like, you're talking about a team that can't score touchdowns, is averaging 11.8 points per game through 10 weeks of the regular season. Someone has to take the blame for this. And if the Giants are deciding to write it out with Brian Daboll needs to hold somebody accountable for this. He needs to hold himself accountable first and foremost. That's 100% true. But after that, somebody needs to take the blame. And you can't say that it's all Bobby Johnson, the offensive line coach's fault, that the entire offense fell apart. Yeah, the offensive line has been a problem, but it's not all Bobby Johnson's fault. A lot of it has to be the offensive coordinator, the guy who's in place to manage the entirety of the offense. The entirety of this offense has been terrible. The quarterback has not played well, whether you're talking about Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor was all right, or Tommy DeVito. I mean, you cut some slack to those guys because they're backups, but you look at the running back position, Saquon Barkley has been good when healthy. You look at the wide receivers, they've struggled. You look at the offensive line, it's been a disaster. Darren Waller also struggled, and also when he was healthy, was struggling to get totally involved in the game plan. It's just been a mess on every single factor here. And I don't want to just say, oh, well, it's the offensive line coach's fault that the offensive line isn't playing well. That's his job. Oh, it's the wide receiver coach's fault. Mike Groh, he should have his wide receivers playing better. No, if every single unit on this offense is playing poorly, the guy who oversees all those assistant coaches, oversees every unit, that's who's responsible. So Mike Kafka and a lot of his in-game decisions in terms of abandoning the running game immediately in week 1, in week 2, in week 3. The first 3 weeks of the season, the Giants would just run the ball down the field, get into the red zone, whether they executed with points or a blocked field goal, whatever, and then immediately just go away from the running game and then put all of the weight on Daniel Jones' shoulders. And then the defense always knew what was coming, and it was so easy to stop. Like, these are decisions that Mike Kafka was making from a play calling standpoint. This was his offensive game plan that he had, because a lot of the times those are scripted first drives, so they look great. The Giants look a lot better on those first drives, and then it all falls apart because he's not adjusting. He's not calling good plays. So personally, I'm more than okay with moving off from Mike Kafka, exploring options. And especially because, like you mentioned, if the Giants do decide to go draft a new quarterback, okay, so let's say that they don't draft a new quarterback. They're going ahead with Daniel Jones. Then I think there's an argument to keeping Mike Kafka around. Mike Kafka, Daniel Jones, this will be the third year that they're working together. That's fine. That makes sense. But if the Giants are going with a new quarterback and they're deciding, let's hit the reboot button on this offense, let's start from scratch, then start from scratch. New offensive coordinator, new offensive line coach, new quarterback, maybe even a new quarterback's coach. That's when you redo it. But if you're deciding to move forward with Daniel Jones and you're not drafting a quarterback, then I'm okay with Mike Kafka continuing to develop Daniel Jones in the third year of that system. But if you are deciding to reboot that quarterback position, I think you reboot the entire offense, you find a new OC, and you kind of go from there. Now, here's another thing, Alex, we kind of discussed this off air yesterday, just in discussion, conversation about what this Giants offense could look like in the future. I do think there's an avenue here where Brian Daboll says, I want to take control of this offense. I want to fire Mike Kafka, and I want to be the head coach and the offensive coordinator. Now, I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but there are head coaches around the NFL who do both jobs. They are the head coach and they take one of those coordinator positions. And what do? They usually bring in a run game coordinator or a pass game coordinator, like an assistant to help them while they are the offensive coordinator and the head coach. There are coaches around the league that do that. And it wouldn't shock me to see Brian Daboll do that because it seems like he gave his offense to somebody and they didn't know what to do with it and they destroyed it with Mike Kafka. So I think that Brian Daboll might want to take more control over the offense here. And then that leads, like you were mentioning, with Wink Martindale being such a veteran coach and being an experienced guy who's a really good leader, maybe he moves up to assistant head coach. So it's not all on Brian Daboll to be coordinator and head coach. You can have an assistant head coach here who helps out with a lot of that managerial stuff. Meanwhile, Brian Daboll focuses more heavily on the offense because he is that offensive guru that you mentioned, Alex. And then I think there's a little bit of a solution there. Of course, there are other names. Ken Dorsey's an obvious one that rings true for a potential offensive coordinator replacement. Regardless, I think that Mike Kafka gets the boot. All the reasons I just mentioned. I'm not sure how they replace him. Again, I think that Brian Daboll taking over as OC is a realistic possibility here. But then when you're looking at the defensive coordinator spot, I'm in full agreement with you, Alex. Wink Martindale did everything that he could with the defensive personnel that he was given, with how bad the offense was. You guys, it's hard to really understand, but you really take a look at it. A defense struggles mightily by a bad offense. Like a bad offense severely affects the performance of the defense in terms of getting off the field, executing on these turnovers. The defense just can't keep up with how bad this offense has been. And that's been the real problem for the Giants. So I think the Wink Martindale should stay. And in fact, I'd be willing to expand his role next season, make him an assistant head coach if Brian Daboll wanted to do more on the offensive end. I think that's something that the Giants should explore. Alex, I do want to hear your thoughts on that before we move on to the next subject, kind of how you're feeling about that idea that I'm pitching here. I mean, it's not something I'm concrete about, it's just an idea that I've had and I'm curious to hear what people think, but maybe Brian Daboll takes on more of the load on that offense and just kind of takes control of it. And maybe he kind of serves as your OC for the upcoming 2024 season. What are your thoughts on that? Especially if the Giants have a rookie quarterback in there who wants to do the whole Josh Allen thing again, get really close to developing him. Do you think that Brian Daboll could potentially take on both of those roles, head coach and offensive coordinator?
I mean, we kind of discussed this yesterday, as you mentioned, and that was really the paramount reason why keeping Wink Martindale is even more important if you go in that direction, because Wink Martindale has the qualities to be a head coach, and maybe you would promote him to assistant head coach. We discussed that, so that way you can smooth over any the allotment of job requirement to a head coach and the necessity to be looking at all things, and be everything's on your shoulders, the time management, clock management, substituting players, making sure that everything is running smoothly as a team on the fields, during games. That is not a difficult, that is a very difficult task. And Brian Daboll has this season showed that it's kind of a little bit too much for him at times, whether it be bad timeouts, bad time management, bad challenges, stuff that we were like, wait, why are you doing that? Why you call timeout there? Stuff like this. I feel like maybe they bring in, and I said this the other day or yesterday, I wonder why they don't bring in someone to help him with the clock management specifically, like a clock management specialist, like quality control coach, you said. Why not bring in someone to help with that? Because the Giants consistently make these dumbass mistakes. This feels like the easiest thing. Have someone dedicated to managing the clock instead of the head coach, who clearly sometimes is being drawn in different directions because his wide receiver is throwing a tantrum on the sideline, or somebody is yelling at him, or he's having an animated discussion with Saquon Barkley or Wink Martindale, and him are having a heated conversation. It draws your attention away from what actually needs to be done on the field, which is managing the freaking game. So, with that being said, making Brian Daboll the head coach in addition to the offensive coordinator, I'm worried it's going to be too much for him. I'm worried it's just too much. If we're concerned about how he's been this season as a head coach, adding that much more responsibility onto his plate makes me feel a little bit concerned about it. So that's really my take on it. Is I think it's too much for Brian Daboll. However, if you elevate Wink Martindale at assistant head coach job and you give him more responsibility for the head coaching role, maybe you can figure that out. Maybe you can find a balance there. However, let's talk about that one kind of wild. We came up with a wild scenario yesterday, and essentially it was regarding Joe Brady, right? Tell me about your Joe Brady theory that could work out here if the Giants did end up with Caleb Williams.
All right, now I feel like we're playing fan fiction, okay? We're getting fan theory. This is conspiracy theory. This is fun, though, okay? This is what I like to do. I like to get the wheels turning and come up with these crazy scenarios. But basically, what I was pitching to Alex yesterday was, okay, imagine a scenario where the Giants do land the first overall draft pick, right? And they take Caleb Williams. So Caleb Williams, if you guys didn't know, recently over in Buffalo, we all know that they fired offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey. If you didn't know, they promoted Joe Brady into offensive coordinator there. Joe Brady was, I think, the passing game coordinator or quarterbacks coach, whatever he was at LSU when Joe Burrow had that historic season that turned him into the number 1 overall draft pick. Since then, he's been working as an assistant coach for the Buffalo Bills. And so, not saying that Brian Daboll has a connection with Joe Brady, but he has a connection with the Bills. He knows a lot of people in that building, so he can get a pretty good determination of who Joe Brady is and whether or not he would be a good OC, and we can kind of evaluate him for the next portion of the season. But essentially, Sean McDermott looks like he could be out in Buffalo by the end of the season if they don't turn things around. If they end up missing the playoffs, they might fire their head coach, clean house, new coaching staff. That means Joe Brady is basically a free agent, free to go wherever and be an offensive coordinator for any team. So here's the thing. When Ken Dorsey was fired and Joe Brady was promoted, Caleb Williams took to social media to celebrate that fact. Not celebrate the fact that Ken Dorsey was fired, but to celebrate the fact that Joe Brady was given the OC role. Because apparently, if you read back on it, Joe Brady was heavily involved in the recruitment of Caleb Williams to LSU. It didn't happen. He went to Oklahoma and then USC instead. But he was very close with Joe Brady, and they did have a connection there. So kind of my idea here that I was spitballing is if the Bills clean house, Joe Brady is out there for the taking, the Giants draft Caleb Williams, you could see a situation where they reunite Joe Brady and Caleb Williams, bring Joe Brady in as a New York Giants offensive coordinator, develop Caleb Williams under Joe Brady, who he already has a great, strong relationship with, who turned Joe Burrow into the superstar that he is. Then you combine Brian Daboll's wisdom with Joe Brady's wisdom and the talent of Caleb Williams. So that was my bizarre sales pitch that I was just throwing out there. Conspiracy theory. I know that it's like 7 dominoes need to fall in order for us to get to that point. I understand. But I do think that it is something exciting to think about and kind of keep a close eye on, like now I think Giants fans have a little bit more of a reason to watch some Bills games maybe and see how that offense performs. If this offense turns things around, and they do end up cleaning house from the coaching staff this offseason, Joe Brady's going to be one of those top names, I think, in mind for Giants fans when the time comes for us to fire Mike Kafka. And then especially it heats up if the Giants are taking a quarterback and they do look at Caleb Williams, then you really just start to get excited thinking about the possibility of reuniting Caleb Williams with Joe Brady and then seeing what happens there. That could be really exciting stuff. So, Alex, I know, like I said, it's kind of a conspiracy theory. It's like fan fiction. So many things have to happen for us to get to that point. But it is kind of an exciting possibility and scenario out there with all these dominoes. If they do fall, I imagine you would be pretty intrigued by the possibility of getting a young, exciting OC like that, like Joe Brady, and trying to unite him with a premier young quarterback talent in Caleb Williams.
I mean, look, so I said this to Anthony yesterday in the sense that sometimes I like that fresh-blooded offensive coordinator, like for example, Mike Kafka in his first year, even like Kellen Moore with Dallas Cowboys. You see some of these offensive coordinators come in and they introduce something new, something fresh, something they can build around. Instead of going after these like proven commodities that everyone knows, like everyone knows what they do. They know their strategy, they know their style, and it becomes like outdated very quickly. The Giants have gone that route in the past, and I think it's been problematic for them. But I do like the idea of fresh blood. Look, Joe Brady, what he did in that air raid offense, like, really just let it fly with LSU and Joe Burrow. And he has connections with Caleb Williams, as you kind of referenced. And he was a guy that heavily recruited him to come to LSU, built a really strong relationship with Caleb Williams back, when that process was unfolding. And Caleb has like always supported Joe Brady throughout his kind of tenure in the same thing, vice versa. So, that connection there. Is there something there? Like, is there a Caleb Williams, Joe Brady connection that could happen? Who knows? Obviously, it's just complete theoretical kind of nonsense at this point in time, but it's fun. It's exciting to talk about, what ifs in the NFL. Because, again, like, you never know. And if they fire Mike Kafka, who knows what happens? Like, Kafka's offense, I will say this. Last year, they covered up, and here's my problem. they covered up, and this kind of goes back into like why firing Kafka like could actually happen, because last year they covered up a lot of weaknesses using play action. Daniel Jones had 700 yards rushing, had a couple rushing touchdowns. But once teams shut that part of the game down for them, the offense became nothing. It became, we couldn't throw the football. Our pass protection was bad. And like, look, a lot of negative variables were impacting Mike Kafka and the progression of this offense. Obviously, Brian Daboll had a big say in this as well. And seemingly during practice, they looked really sharp, really good, as we saw, and then they just couldn't do it during a game. Why is it? Well, and I think this is the question that we have to be asking ourselves, Anthony. Why is it that they can do it in practice at a very high level, but can't translate it to the football field in an actual game? You know what I mean? Why is it that they cannot take practice, what they're doing exceptionally well on the practice field, and transition it to an actual NFL game? Why is that so difficult for the Giants? You know, why is it so hard that practice makes perfect, but once you perfect it on the practice field, it becomes something you've never done before on an NFL field? You know, how do you think that, like, why do you think that's happening? Like, why do you think that we are failing to actually put it into live action, failing to apply it in a real scenario? But in practice, it seems like it's easy. And Saquon Barkley said it. Like, in practice, we look great. We're running around the field. We look phenomenal. We look fantastic. We don't look like a 2-8 team, but we can't do it on the football field. Why, is that a coaching thing? Because to me, is it an execution thing? I'm having a hard time figuring it out personally, because I feel like, you know, we saw the throws Daniel Jones make to Darius Slay. We saw what they were doing. But why is it suddenly falling apart once they actually reach the NFL field? Maybe it's just a injuries thing. Maybe it really is just injuries all over again. I'm having a hard time diagnosing it, but I kind of just have to place the blame on everybody. You know what I mean? And everyone's to blame. There's no single person here that I can say it's his fault. It is everyone's fault. The offensive line, Daniel Jones, Mike Kafka, Brian Daboll, they are all at fault to a certain degree. So, you know, it is what it is right now. But I do think that if they do fire Mike Kafka, and I think that you said it best, actually, if they keep Daniel Jones and they don't draft a quarterback, I think Mike Kafka stays, because they can't change an offense again. But if they do go after another quarterback, they may bring in an offensive coordinator that fits the needs and strengths of that specific quarterback. If it is Drake May, if it is, Caleb Williams, maybe they bring in someone that is tailored, and they're going to bring in those candidates and say, how are you going to build our offense around this player? You know, how are you going to, and Brian Daboll, I trust him on offense. I trust that he knows what he's doing. He's going to listen to those guys and say, all right, that aligns with what I think we should be doing too. And I think that ultimately is what may happen if they go with a new quarterback. So maybe Kafka is tied to Daniel Jones, and we'll see what happens as the months unfold and the draft inevitably gets closer.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, if the Giants do get to the end of the regular season and then they fire Mike Kafka, I am going to personally take that as a sign that they're looking at quarterbacks, just because if they were sticking with Daniel Jones as the future of the franchise, they have been so clear, abundantly clear about this continuity thing. Like John Mara has talked about it. Joe Schoen has talked about it. Brian Daboll has talked about it. They want to keep a coordinator in place for Daniel Jones. So if they end up firing this offensive coordinator, I have a feeling that it means they might just be rebooting the quarterback position and the offense in general. I mean, some people might disagree with me. Some people might take it as a different message, just that Mike Kafka was terrible and wasn't a fit here and that they wanted to fire him. And maybe that is what it is. Maybe I'd be reading too much into it. But that is something I'd be considering as a possibility. If they do fire Mike Kafka, I could see them going in a new direction altogether on offense. But let's talk about these final 8 weeks of the season before we wrap here, Alex, and kind of this idea that, you know, the Giants, no matter what, they won't be tanking, you know, and this is something that we know, right? Like this Giants organization, the way it's ran, John Mara, his history here, I mean, the Mara family in general, the integrity of the New York Giants would never allow them to tank. Giants pride is going out there every Sunday, every Thursday, every Monday, whenever you're on the football field and trying to win football games, right? They are not going to purposely lose games. But does that even matter at this point? Because this team is so freaking bad, like I said at the beginning of the episode, I don't think they need to try to lose. They're just going to lose. They're just that bad, right? And I think that's kind of where the Giants are at. But what could prevent them from getting that first pick? You know, I mean, unless they tank for it, it's never a guarantee. You got the Carolina Panthers. The pick is owned by the Bears. The Panthers have been really bad this year. I don't know if they're going to win many games. It's looking like a narrow race to that first overall pick. But just kind of how are you feeling, Alex? You know, with these final 8 weeks of the season, they're going to draw on, or 7 weeks, whatever it is. We've got a long time here between now and the end of the regular season. Do you think that tanking should be an option? Is that something that you ever personally support? Me personally, I don't think it matters because the Giants are so bad they're going to lose anyway. I don't think that they should purposely try to lose. But I know that you're feeling in a way where it doesn't matter because the Giants are so bad. You don't see them winning any more games this season. Am I right?
Look, I'm never going to support losing on purpose. And that's simply because, like, as a competitive nature and, like, you know, people pay hard earned money to go to these games. They want to see the team win. I'll never support losing because of that, because those people, you know, they're working 9 to 5s and freaking grinding just to go see this team show any sense of life. I have respect for them. You know, I have respect for those people. I don't really have respect for the Giants right now because they continuously make the same mistakes. And right now, I just don't like I don't respect the process because it's let us down. But I do think we are heading in a better direction in terms of cap health, in terms of drafting. I think we've seen inklings of positivity, but we're still far from where we need to be. So I need to see more at this point. Like, you know, I mean, look, I bought in so much to this coaching staff and the process that they were unfolding in. Obviously, as a Giants fan, I've learned it's like, you know, I feel crazy, insane. Like the definition of insane is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And we keep doing the same thing over and over again at times, and I expect different results. So I'm just freaking insane at this point for thinking this team has any shot of coming back. But you know what? The most important position is quarterback. And look, I don't know if I trust Daniel Jones coming off an ACL tear to walk this team back into a competitive mode. I don't know if I have faith in that. Personally, I don't think I do. So I'm definitely on board with considering a quarterback in this upcoming draft. You know, of course, many people have opinions. There's a lot of rumors coming out about the idea that the Giants are not sold on getting rid of Daniel Jones and not sold on moving on. And internal people are saying, oh, you know, sources are saying that, like this guy and that guy are certainly considering the fact that, you know, Jones may be here in 2024 as the starter and there may not be another quarterback, which is 100% possible. I just think would be a really bad move. If you have a top 2 pick, which is rare to acquire, even during Dave Gettleman's era, we were ended up top 10 picks every season, but getting a top 2 pick is very difficult to actually get because you have to be so freaking bad. The Giants are that freaking bad, and you skip on the fact that you may be able to land a better player at the most important position of football. You keep taking quarterbacks until you find a superstar, man. Like that's how you win championships. People aren't winning championships anymore with you know, mid-level quarterbacks. You need Patrick Mahomes to win. You need even Jalen Hurts with a strong roster around him to win. You need elite quarterbacks to win in this day and age. Daniel Jones is never going to be an elite quarterback, and if you do think he's going to be an elite quarterback, I mean, I could reference the last 5 years of mistakes to back that up, that he's probably not going to be elite. And at one point, maybe we thought he could be, but I think I'm over it at this point. I think I'm over that narrative 5 years in. I think we've seen enough. So you just keep going for those elite quarterbacks until you find one. And eventually, once you do stumble across one and you develop one, then you're good to go. So, you know, I think you're kind of in the same boat as that. You just have to keep going until you find that elite, that like superstar guy that's going to change the course of an organization, elevate everybody around you. I mean, everyone's pointing to CJ Stroud now. Look at their offensive line. Look at their playmakers. They don't have that many guys. CJ Stroud is making everybody around him better. And like, that's something that we have not seen at times. Daniel Jones has the capacity to do that. We've seen him do it, but he doesn't do it on an every game basis, which is my problem. He's very inconsistent in that regard. So, you know, at this point in time, I think that the cards are definitely falling in the direction of a new quarterback. And, you know, I wish DJ panned out. I wish he had a really great career here with the Giants. He's a great dude. He's a leader. The locker room never turned on him like they are with Mac Jones in New England right now. And I have a lot of respect for that. You know, I do really, really resent the fact that he didn't pan out, or he isn't panning out. And I wish he did, because he's such a perfect quarterback for this team in terms of how he handles the media and all the criticism. But as far as tanking, the players are never, ever, ever, and the coaches are never, ever, ever going to say that they are tanking. But the Giants are bad enough to lose all on their own. They don't even need to try to lose. They are going to lose because they are a bad team, and they're heavily injured, and their tackles are hurt, and their quarterbacks are hurt, and their defense is shredded. Look, I just think right now the morale is low, and if the next 2 weeks, Washington and the New England Patriots, those are their best chances to win. Like, I don't think they win another game this season if they don't beat either of those two teams. So we'll see what happens. But guys, I don't ever expect this team to ever tank. I don't support tanking, but the Giants are bad enough. Losing ultimately may end up becoming the most positive thing for them in the long term, but I'm never going to support them losing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you only get to watch so many Giants games in your lifetime. You want to see them win football games when you can. I understand in the long run, losing is probably the best thing for them. But I'm not going to root for them to lose. I mean, these guys are playing for their jobs. Brian Daboll in particular needs to stack at least probably 1 or 2 more wins on the season in order to feel comfortable going into the offseason, I would assume, in terms of his job security. I don't think the Giants will ever purposely lose. I don't really want to see them purposely lose. But again, I don't think it matters. They're so freaking bad. I think they're going to lose anyway. I don't know if this Giants team has it in them to win any more games this season unless they make some significant adjustments between now and the end of the regular season. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I know that there's been a lot of talk. I mean, you've got Dan Duggan of The Athletic today writing an article saying that the Giants are absolutely considering drafting a quarterback. Then you have other reports saying that the Giants are absolutely sticking with Daniel Jones. It's all conflicting reports, and I'll tell you, I think that all of it, every single report right now, is bullshit because the Giants don't know what they're doing. We are not in the offseason. We are still in the middle. Like, we only just crossed the halfway point of the regular season. The Giants have not made any decisions on the future. They don't know if they're drafting a quarterback. They don't know what they're doing with Daniel Jones. It's a wait-and-see approach right now, guys. So don't get all caught up in the headlines and the reports because right now they don't fully matter. We'll see when we get closer to April. I mean, we're talking about April. That's a long ways away, Alex. So we'll see what happens. I mean, it's going to be a long rest of this regular season, a very long offseason. We're going to be diving into all these draft prospects, quarterbacks, and otherwise because it's fun and it gives us something to look forward to and something to discuss. So I'm excited to do all that. Right now, I don't think the Giants have any decision made on any player on this roster, and I think that they have a lot of big decisions coming up. And of course, we're going to update you on all of those big decisions that they make right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode and comment your thoughts on the topics down below in the comment section. If you listen on our Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, we will catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.